I'm Rob, the Dungeon Tutor, also known as Omnisci, and today I'm doing an RPGaDay video. So this is the 23rd day of RPGaDay, which if you're catching this in the middle of everything, I've been doing a question every day for the good feels for the gaming community. Today's question is, what situation is your character currently in? Now, Forever DM right here, so most of the time I am the person behind the screen. I don't have my own character per se, although I have on occasion run GM NPCs. Like right now in one of my games, because sometimes people can't show up, I threw in an artificer named Colossal who can do just about anything. He can do a little tanking, he can do a little healing, a little shooting, you know, whatever the group needs. He's also a resource for them for magical items. Given time, he can produce just about anything. So, he's not really somebody I play, though. I've got a full table. I don't really need to run a GM NPC, too. So he's just kind of in the background as a resource, just in case. So I don't really consider him. The only player character I have right now is in a solo RPG for a game called Colossal. And the character's name is Ankylius the Shaker. He is a hound, which is as far as a job classification, he has magic stones called Rooks stones that give him magic powers. Effectively magical powers. He would kind of argue that it just doesn't seem like they're magical. It seems like there's more to it than that, but for all intents and purposes, he can create earthquakes, he can viciously vibrate somebody, he can create explosions. So it seems like an ability that would mostly be used for offensive abilities, but he's working on trying to diversify his talents and figure out other ways of using his powers. What's his current situation? Well, he's been ordered out of his hometown of Graham as a Knight Select, meaning that the town of Graham was a fortress village where the knights in the Order of Rookfall would keep their family, their children who were too young to go out into the world, and any family who are not knights themselves generally do stuff that supports the knights. They may be great smiths. They may keep the village ready for the knights to come back and feast and resupply. So, you know, they all have a responsibility there. Some of them also teach the next generation, too. So that is why he grew up in Graham. His mother is a knight of Rookfall, and she never spent a lot of time with him because she had to go out and perform the duties of a knight. So he was raised by surrogate families basically through most of his life, which is the way that the knights work. So he was indoctrinated into the Order's teachings. Now, Colossal is a strange world. It is a most interesting IP. Your world is basically a massive castle with single rooms that are the size of, you know, what would be a county or maybe a state. At least here in the United States, they're absolutely enormous. You can walk or ride or drive or whatever until you get to a wall, and you can eventually find a door or windows in your world. But in these rooms, they're so vast. There are forests and lakes and rivers and mountains, and some rooms are entire oceans. There are also hallways and various other stairways, but they're so vast that they are massive landscape features for the people who live in Colossal. Everyone's human. There's no other races. But what separates people is the fact that all your technology is based off of the Rooks. And Rooks are basically like living towers. Kind of like massive golems, if you want to think of them that way. But to what purpose they were created, no one really knows. All that's known is that if it gets an eye on somebody, they become extremely aggressive. And considering they can get to be 40, 50, 60, 70 feet tall, that aggressive could be very, very dangerous. Also, many of them have magical powers. As a matter of fact, they seem like they all do, but some of them have the magical stones that give them the powers nicked or damaged or whatnot. That can happen. My character is one of the Helmed, which means he has an inherent ability with the stones so that he can put them into a special stone helm that he's created, made out of the components from the core of one of these rooks. And with the stone that's in it, he can actually use some of the powers just like he was a rook. And that makes him extraordinarily powerful in battle. Because that is his main focus, though, he's not so great at exploration, so he's going to be at the mercy of whatever the cards dictate I come across. And did I say cards? Yeah, the game runs on a deck of playing cards minus the jokers. So the standard poker deck. It's interesting. Certainly it is. But my character's current mission is, as a Knight Elect, to go out into the world and either take down a rook or learn some new lore about the rook that he can bring back to the Knights. If he can do that, he'll be considered a full Knight. It is not uncommon for young Knights doing this to get killed, because, again, your opponents are 70-foot tall stone tower monsters with magic. It's also possible that a lot of Knights just don't feel like coming back. They take the knowledge that they've gotten, making them very, very self-sufficient in the world, and maybe they decide they don't want to be a Knight. Maybe they decide they want to be a warlord, or they just want to settle down and have a family, or they just want to keep exploring and not go back. And realistically, I don't even know what my character's motivation is going to be by the time he actually accomplishes the objectives that have been laid out before him. I have no idea. If he does come back, I'm sure the Knights will have more for him to do. The Rookfall Knights are dedicated to the defeat and scavenging from these rooks. Most of the technology of the world is based on these rooks and their magics. So, since my character is a Helmed, that means he's very, very skilled at creating devices using these magical abilities. So he's very much in demand. It's just that he's got this weird-looking helm on his head. He can do magic, and there's going to be some people who are going to look at him sideways about, you know, how trustworthy is he? Oh, is he brainwashed by these rooks? There's going to be a lot of paranoia and stuff. It should be interesting. But here's the thing. It's open-ended. Go out until you've accomplished what you've been set out to do, which my character is pretty duty-bound, so as of right now, if I find a rook relatively soon, I very well might just turn around, go back to Graham, and say, hey, I did it. Here's the rook stones to prove I beat it, and this is where the body is, so you can, harvest it. But, I'm claiming my spot as a knight, and then the next chapter of his story will continue. So that's the situation. Now, again, this is a solo RPG, my first ever attempt at a solo RPG. And to get the bonus content out of this question, I came up with a lot of the quest and everything because, quite simply, there's no game master. I make up everything. If he talks to somebody, I make up that dialogue. It's not an actual role-playing game in the traditional sense of tabletop role-playing games. Does it scratch the itch a little bit? It lets me still be creative. It lets me still world build, which is something I like to do anyhow. But Achilles does have a bit of a personal story, but basically that's what this game is. It is a series of writing prompts getting me to care about this character and write a story about him. So that's what I'll probably end up doing, but it has not really scratched the itch for wanting to play, unfortunately. So we're going to keep looking for something for that, but that is Achilles, and I think his story is a valid and a good one. And I think some of the future questions are going to be about Achilles again, so we'll discuss that as we go. I think that's a little bit more interesting than going back to some of my other characters like Corbrecht, Cinderflume, my Dwarven Wizard, who was great. He was fun. Or Galhord, who was a Goliath Barbarian, the other character that I played in the last campaign that I was a part of, which I could talk about, but I think right now I want to give Ancilius his time to shine, because I related the adventures of Corbrecht and Galhard through videos that I did on my Lair of Omnicide channel called State of the Dungeon, which, if you want, you can go back to those. But, you know, they were fun, and they had their moments, but now I'm going to give Ancilius one and see how he does. So, that's my answer. Hopefully this entertained you to some extent, and maybe gave you some ideas of your own. If you enjoyed it, or want to talk about your character and what your character is currently doing, feel free to leave in the comments below. And you could also go to my Dungeon Tutor Facebook group and post there. We can have a little conversation about it. If you really care about my characters and my experiences in solo RPG, they will be coming under my Dungeon Tutor. I do want to cover solo play because, well, obviously after COVID's mark was left on society, a lot of people have kind of retreated away from face-to-face gaming, which is understandable. And for them, solo RPGs may be the obvious choice to get into and see if that scratches the itch too. So it doesn't for me, but it might for other people too, especially those whose role-playing games really is a deep-seated need to create and write themselves. So, at any rate, thank you for joining me. I am Rob the Dungeon Tutor, or Omnicide, and I thank you for joining me. Until next time, farewell.